Our panel discussion on engineering, surgery, and intervention. Tonight, we are talking a little about opportunities in the field as well as some career paths. My name is Mike Miga, and I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at Vanderbilt. And I'm also the director of the Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program here at Vanderbilt. And so, for those that may not know about the program, it's a professional Master of Engineering program, and it's designed to provide advanced technical skill sets for kind of cutting edge technologies within surgery and intervention. We also provide professional development aspects and soft skills. We also have a nice capstone design. And one of the hallmarks of the program is the clinical immersion experiences. So you really get to understand where the technologies are being used and how to develop them. So if you're interested, be sure to look up Vanderbilt's Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program. And so with that background done, tonight we're going to think a little bit out loud and talk to some engineering thought leaders and where surgery and intervention and technologies are going into healthcare and what it takes to work in these fields. So with that, let me welcome our panelists tonight. First, we have Dr. Jing Zhao, who is Senior Principal Analytics Tech Lead and Technical Fellow at the Surgical Robotics Operating Unit within Medtronic. And we also have Dr. Stephen Allward, who is the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at Kitware. So welcome, gents. It's good to see you. We've seen each other quite a bit in the past, but now we're going to do a little bit different and kind of go through some interesting areas and some experiences that you all have had. So we have about 30 minutes, so we'll kind of walk our way through it. And so for those that are in the audience, there's also some nice bios on both of these gents at the registration site. So if you get a chance, go take a look at it, and you'll kind of see that. So let's kind of get started. I'm going to start with you, Stephen, if that's okay. So I guess, can you tell us a little bit about Kitware as a commercial enterprise and maybe your role and perhaps maybe, I don't know, an example technology of what's coming out of Kitware?
Sure. Kitware is kind of a unique business model in that we primarily develop open source software. That's around 80% of our business. And this is really truly free open source software for use in either academic or commercial enterprises. And with this open source software, we typically help you, it's made to tackle hard problems, so scientific problems. And so we have medical image analysis packages, we have AI packages, high performance computing packages, computer vision, and so forth and so on. And so it's really open source software that we then provide professional services, kind of consulting services on top of for those people who want to integrate it into their products and processes if they need help. But really, it's been a wonderful kind of unique business model because we get to have kind of 1 foot in academia, 1 foot in industry, provide this open source software that is funded often by development grants from NIH, DARPA, DOD, and DOE. And so one example projects that we have is the Insight Toolkit. This is one of our longest lasting projects. It began in 1999 as a collaboration that was funded by the National Library of Medicine involving 5 other research institutes. So University of Utah, Carnegie Mellon, and others. And, it's continued to this day. It's, million lines of code, hundreds of thousands of users. It's in regulatory approved products as well as in basic research. It's been adapted to support a lot of AI, deep learning methods. It's really, Kitware creates this open source software that has really changed the field and become the de facto standard within the field.
Neat. Yeah, I know for me, when I started my lab, one of the first things I did at the visualization toolkit when I first started, I think it's probably version like 1.0 or 2.0, whatever.
Sure.
We definitely invested in it within our lab, and we've been using it ever since. So it's been great. Actually, let's switch over to Jing now. Jing, and you're in the area of robotics and surgery and intervention, and can you tell us a little bit about what Medtronic does, what your unit does, kind of what your role is, and maybe something something new and interesting coming out of that group?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike, for the invitation. So Medtronic, as you know, is the largest healthcare medtech company in the world. Our annual revenue is around 32 billion US dollars. We are actually organized in terms of disease and procedures. We have 4 largest groups: cardiovascular, neuroscience, surgical medical, and diabetes. So I'm in the surgical medical group, and I'm in the surgical robotics operating unit. My day-to-day job is focusing on understand how data is being used in our robotic procedure, as well as looking forward to new opportunities that can come into Medtronic's product portfolio, so we can potentially leverage robotics technology for some other interventional medicine procedures, such as cardiovascular and even neurovascular procedures. So I think it's a very exciting role. I got a chance to see both the data side as well as the procedural side. So that's pretty much what I'm doing on a daily basis. So the one technology that you guys may want to watch out for is our Hugo robotic assistant surgical system. We are just enrolled our very first patient in the US for the clinical trial, and we got our device approved in Europe and some other countries around the globe. But I think within the next couple of years, you will see our major rollout of our Hugo system in the United States of America.
Yeah, no, one thing I love about Medtronic, you hire a lot of our students too, which is great.
That's right.
We have a lot of folks, I find the divisions in the units very interesting, because it's almost like big separate groups that are all under the Medtronic, umbrella. We have a lot of folks that are over in surgical navigation. And so it's been a really nice relationship with Lisa Vanderbilt and Medtronic in the past, as well as some of your internship programs and things like that, which have been great as well. Okay, so let me flip back to Stephen for a second. So you had mentioned in your lead up open source software. So kind of what is that, to the general kind of trainee out there? What do you mean by the open source movement? And I think you've been at that that interface for a long time. So I guess what have you seen as the impact towards the development of kind of surgical interventional technologies, the image processing technologies? What has been that major impact that you've seen? Kind of, can you describe it?
Sure. The major impact has twofold. One is in academia. And so it allows a research lab to get up and running that much quicker. And so it's free, low cost for entry, highly capable. And so it kind of raises the lower bar for entry into a new field. For a research lab or for a grad student, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I phrase it as you're standing on the shoulders of giants. And, for a grad student to be able to, take, for example, MONAI, which is the Medical Open Network for AI. It's a new toolkit that we've been working on. It has so many different AI algorithms embedded within it, deep learning algorithms and options that are really intuitive and easy to use. And a grad student can, implement their own method and compare it against those or combine those in unique ways. It really just accelerates the research that's occurring within academia and levels the playing field. But then even more impact happens, I think, in the commercial field. And this is, for your audience in particular, because if you're a startup company, or else even if you're in with Medtronic and you're investigating a new product, right? This gives you a platform that, again, ITK has been developed and VTK has been developed since 1999 and earlier. Hundreds of people have contributed to it. Kitware has not written the majority of the code in ITK. It's been written by people like you and others who are leaders within the field. And so a new business, if they want to go ahead and develop that first in human trials, develop a prototype to show their venture capital people or so forth, they can begin with ITK and really build upon the best algorithms that are out there. And so it's a wonderful way to get started within a product. But then you can also carry that forward to making your final project, because they've been involved in regulatory approved processes, regulatory approved end user applications have already incorporated ITK in their development. And so you have confidence that you're building upon something that not only did you get for free and that you don't have to pay licensing and royalties free on, but it's really the best of the best that's out there. And it keeps improving. So when you read about that new method that just came out and, that was published in the latest NeuroIPS conference or whatever, a couple months later, it's within MONAI or it's within ITK. And so you as a product manager, if you want to see, is that new algorithm going to move the bar for this product that you have? You integrate it into your product. You just download the more recent version of ITK, see how it does within your product. And if it does a whole lot better, then you start the FDA process in which you're going to do an incremental update on your software. Otherwise, you don't have to outlay all that expense or go to that risk.
Yeah, so that's a great platform. I mean, I think that's wonderful to have that and to have that kind of linked into the industry so well, and to have that kind of versatility. It's just a really nice thing, especially for the students. I mean, they love it, and that's great. I think it's awesome. Jing, you have to be asleep at the wheel to not notice how much robotics has kind of penetrated surgery and intervention now. I mean, it's the last decade has been unbelievable, I think. And so I guess, obviously it's a huge impact. I was wondering if you could speak to that impact, what you've seen and kind of in your experience, and kind of just give us a good sense of that as far as how it's impacting surgery and intervention and what you're seeing at Medtronic that's trying to kind of knock into the market too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Medtronic is on the way of becoming a robotics powerhouse in medtech. Although our install base is still quite limited as of today, but we project our growth of surgical robotics business is going to be very quickly. So I can give you a number for your audience. So today, the surgical market is one of the most attractive markets of all healthcare. It's around the $25 billion. And about $6 billion is the robotic procedures, and another $19 billion is for open and laparoscopic surgeries. And it's forecasted to nearly double in the next 10 years, getting to $48 billion. Among all those growths, the robotics going to grow from 6 billion to 21 billion with annual growth rate about 14%. And the lab and the open procedure are going to grow at about 4% from 19 to 27. So those contracts actually tell you more and more customers start to accept robotic system. This is really the robotic technology become democratized across operating units, operating groups. That's exactly the news I think our audience want to hear about. It's the right time to jump into this exciting space.
Yeah, it's I know for Vanderbilt, we have many robots now, and it certainly is a way to bring patients in the door, and they are more comfortable with the technology. I think in general, AI, both AI and robotics, we're seeing much more comfort from patients, and so I think it's hard to not see where things are going with that in terms of its impact into the field. So here's a little different question. So we have this Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program, and so one of the things we concentrate on is clinical immersion and kind of getting that experience with the clinicians. And I guess I'll switch back to Stephen again, go back and forth between you two. I guess the value of having some form of education in the clinical environment and to kind of seeing technologies developed in there. I guess in what way do you kind of see that as important for kind of the things that you work on? And are you seeing any more now evolving need towards understanding kind of clinical environments? Like, can you speak to that a little bit about with respect to kitware?
Sure. I'm actually going to go back to, getting my PhD degree at UNC. And there, the chairman of the department actually taught an undergraduate course called Toolsmiths, I believe it is, or Computer Scientists as Toolsmiths. And he was a friend, and lessons learned from hearing about his curriculum and that coursework just resonated with me throughout my career. I mean, I went from getting my PhD to being actually a professor in radiology, where I got tenure and everything in academia before switching to industry and kitware, and so I've seen had the wonderful opportunity to be a toolsmith working next to clinicians for 9 years that I was in those radiology departments. And that experience is just invaluable because it's not something you're going to read in a book. It's not that they can explain and describe to you in sufficient ways for you to really learn from it until you do it yourself. And you have that conversation with the clinician where you realize what language works and is common between radiologists and computer scientists or engineers and so forth, and what language is not, different meanings of the same word, and then how to understand really what they perceive as the problem and how you can translate that into a solution. Just takes this iterative approach that if you've got experience doing that communication, doing that iteration, and trying to get at the heart of the problem versus, taking some data, going off to your lab, spending 6 months munging that data and then giving it back to the clinician, and only to realize you've solved something that was not the issue at hand at all. It's to get that experience during school, that's just invaluable. And so I applaud your program for what it provides.
Yeah, no, I think, when you think they talk about surgery being art is something to be observed, you really do need the observational experience, like how what you're describing is very much so. And I think It's really, really interesting. Now, Jing, on the other hand, you have, we're dealing with surgical robotics. That's a whole different observational experience, I would argue. So I guess what are your thoughts on kind of the value of clinical observation, and also maybe even with, in line with kind of the products that you're developing? What's that experience been like, and is it valuable for students to have that kind of experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it also reminds me about my graduate student days. Because I was specialized in electromagnetics, not in biomedical engineering or anything related to medicine back then. So I did not get a chance to observe any procedures at my graduate school. So once I came to Medtronic, it became so obvious that comparing to some of my colleagues who went to a biomedical engineering program and got chance to observing procedures in the OR, I definitely doesn't speak the same language. I mean, I have to constantly catch up on my understanding of anatomy, the way the physician describes the things, the workflows, and that become actually expensive. Think about how you do clinical observation in the industry, right? You have to send an engineer to the field to following, shadowing a a sales rep, and trying to get into the OR. If this doctor allows you to do that for 2 hours, that becomes not easy. As you are a student, you have this you have the operating room next to your engineering building. You just work there, talk to maybe your peers there. That becomes such a kind of natural and easy flow. So I definitely strongly recommend our students to go there, take the advantage of Vanderbilt program to develop the language. How would you describe things in a clinical context, and bring those experience to the industry? You will be way ahead of other people coming out of like electrical engineering or like me, who has no idea what the surgery looks like.
Could I follow on that?
Yeah.
Because you commented that maybe robotics was, some level of indirection. I mean, it almost all comes down to workflow. All right. Because you can make the best product in the world. And if it doesn't integrate into a clinical workflow where time is money or time is a patient's life, it's not going to get used. All right. And there's so many products sitting by the wayside because they just couldn't get integrated into workflow. So I would argue that even now, more than ever, with the advent of robotics and with the advent of AI, it's just paramount to have that experience because, AI, again, it's going to produce numbers and it's going to say, oh, probability of cancer, 75%. Where does a clinician go with that? All right. Or 75% chance that this is the boundary of the tumor in the middle of a surgery. Where does a clinician go with that? You really have to integrate it into augmented reality, robotic assisted systems, holding the ultrasound probe as you move the needles, all of these different integrations are automations. They have to be collaborative. I mean, because the surgeon's an expert. We're not going to replace them, right? Everything that we're doing is augmenting their intelligence, augmenting their skill. And so anyway, even more so, a program like yours is now even more important than when I was a grad student or Jing was a grad student. I mean, it's just become really, it's the wave of the future. Anyone can do a Jupyter Notebook kind of Python script for AI. But, getting that into a clinical environment, having it do something useful, it takes that experience you're giving them.
Yeah, it really is when you think of I think in the next decade, the interaction between the physicians and technology, like while procedures are happening, like there's going to be some trust issues in there, I think, as time goes on, of course. But I mean, I think robotics is a good example only because I remember when, some of the first robots came on, people were worried about, not being next to the patient, like they're doing a console-based system. And that was it kind of freaked people out. People were really upset. But over time, as things have come back, come together and people realize how controlled it is, how it can do maneuvers that can't be done by human hands. It's hard not to see that. And the same thing with AI, you're going to have, systems that allow you to make decisions, regarding kind of margin detection and things like that perhaps you can't quite, make sense of, but when it provides you the information, provided it's robust and you can trust it, it's going to kind of start influencing, the way we kind of, resect disease in that case. But so yeah, so it's pretty interesting, and you can't see it going any way but more integrated, I think, and so I think having folks that are kind of at that interface makes a lot of sense. So yeah. Let's say another question would be, so you're aware of the master's programs, and you have your own folks that you kind of hire and stuff. I guess so. What's your feeling on career paths right now? I mean, you kind of mentioned a lot of things, but what's your feeling on career paths and how things are going to change in the future, and perhaps kind of the kinds of things that you're looking at for folks that are kind of come to Kitware or come to Medtronic? What are you looking for?
Jing, I kind of broke the cadence. You want to go first on this one?
Okay, sure, absolutely.
It's to both
So
of you.
Yeah. So I think we are definitely talking about AI, talking about the workflow here. So to me, I want the candidate that speak two languages. One is called the clinical language. You do have to communicate very, very well with the surgical staff, with the physician, to understand the context of the disease and what do they want to achieve. The second language I call the programming language. You have to at least know at least one or maybe two high-level programming language like Python, MATLAB, C++, you name it, right? You need to be comfortable using your programming skills to analyze data, to do controls, and to do some automation like we described earlier. Those two skill sets, it's definitely what I'm looking from the candidates applying for jobs in Medtronic and surgical robotics. I think your program, Mike, definitely is paving the way for the students to get to Medtronic. So I think this is definitely a very valuable experience for all the potential job seekers in the medtech industry.
I love that idea, though, kind of a clinical language and a technical language. In some sense, it's really a nice way to put it. Yeah, Stephen, how about you with Kitware? It's a little different setup, but what are you looking at?
Sure. And it's interesting how it's evolved over time. So I'm going to answer it in terms of who Kitware is now, but I've got a different answer for some other time of, when you're a small startup. But actually one thing is common across them both, and that is a passion. All right. You can, if you're taking something on, use your program to explore the different options to find out what aspect you enjoy. All right. Because if you figure out what you enjoy, that's going to last a lifetime. I mean, that's just, work is no longer work, it's pleasure. Right. And I've been lucky that I've gotten good at hiring over the years. And so I'm working with a bunch of very passionate people. And the only hiring mistakes I've made is when I hire someone who isn't passionate about what they do. And I'm not talking long hours or, dedicating their lives to it or anything along those lines, but they just it's the critical thinking, it's the exchange of ideas and so forth. And you take someone who doesn't have that passion and put them in that room with a bunch of passionate people, they're going to be miserable. Right. And they're going to lower the energy level, everything like that. And so, get that passion. And so that's first and foremost. And then the second is the programming aspect. There was this article that I was just reading about how I think it's managers at Apple are now being encouraged to actually get their hands dirty and go back to coding some. And so they want managers to not just manage, but to deliver. All right. And so everyone has to deliver at all rungs of management and research and so forth. And so that coding is the other language that is, as exactly as he said, and you've got to speak that so you can collaborate with your programmers next to you to move stuff from one researcher to the other, or from one researcher to the development team. And so those sorts of exchange of ideas via code is critical. And I would argue, so computer science background, Python is wonderful. It's what I spend most of my time in, but really spend some time to learn C++ and really delve into high quality software standards and practices. Don't just look at it as Jupyter notebooks, but really, GitHub and all of those things that go continuous integration and testing. You should be using that in your research as well as your final product to advance yourself.
Yeah, I know I run a lab, but boy, I'm happiest when I get to code something or do something in the lab. Like I get to actually, you're managing projects and whatnot, but boy, when I get a chance to actually do something, I love it. So I miss it sometimes, to some degree, but it's one of those things. But
it keeps you honest.
What's that?
It keeps you honest, right?
Yeah, definitely does. Yeah. So you both mentioned passion. You both mentioned kind of, the idea of these certain technical languages. And I think it's kind of interesting. Like, so I think, one of the things about the degree, and I think actually even at Vanderbilt in general, the way we think about these problems is, it doesn't really necessarily sit in one discipline category. It really is a multidisciplinary effort. I mean, Stephen, you got a computer science background. Jing, you got an electrical engineering background, but yet you're doing biomedical problems, largely probably because of the passion associated with it. So I guess, in terms of, I'm a mechanical engineering by training, but then I'm kind of a BME by a doctorate. But I guess, one of the things about the program that's kind of nice is, you can be an electrical engineer, a mechanical engineer, computer science, a biomedical. We kind of welcome them all in terms of, or even physics or math for that matter. I guess, what was your transition like? I mean, in some sense, or in terms of your adapting to those new fields, like what did you find most useful? I mean, it sounds like some of the clinical immersion might have been part of that for you, Stephen, when you were talking before, and Jing. I guess what, in terms of that transition, to doing those kinds of problems, do you have any thoughts about, what that was like for you or any of your experiences, that kind of thing? Jing, probably first.
Sure. So for me, I think the transition, it's really on-the-job training, and you learn stuff, new things by doing, by practicing. Right. This is a totally different from when you are in college. You learn from textbook, from professor teaching. This is about acknowledging that I'm not expert in this domain. I'm gonna jump in and to talk to the right experts and talk to physicians, talk to customers, understand their pain points, and believe in myself that I am going to turn that unmet needs into some requirements, into some prototype, and eventually product. Have a self-confidence that your engineering training prepared you well enough to get into a domain you are not familiar with, and just ride with the wave.
Stephen?
I agree. What he said. I mean, and just want to emphasize the collaborative nature. It is collaboration with clinicians, collaboration with the guy or girl at the desk right next to you. It is depending upon your personality, that's what you'll end up enjoying. It is just, that's where ideas and creativity happens, with the exchange of ideas and so forth. And so when I moved from, trying to crank out the code really quick and trying to, do everything on my own and be the lead and be the first author and everything like that, and kind of chilled out and relaxed, and instead try to come up with a solution that worked for everyone. It involved collaboration, and that's what worked for me. That's when it started clicking.
Gotcha. All right, we're getting close to the end. I got a couple more questions, then we'll wrap it up. So I guess, let's put on our speculative hats for a second. So in terms of things on the horizon, so as far as kitware, you're kind of where you are. Actually, kitware's evolved tremendously over the last 20 years has been huge.
Yeah.
So I guess, what are you looking at? That's the life flight coming in right now, so somebody's coming. What's the future look like for kitware? What are the big horizons, some of the big areas you think you're going to see development move into?
Sure. We're going to see integration of different technologies. We've been doing this big AI push for 2 years, and that's worked out extremely well. I think there's hurdles to cross when it comes to ethical AI, and there I mean ethical AI in a very broad sense, reproducible science, knowing the biases that exist within your models, everything along those lines. There's going to be a big push for that within the medical field, and we're already well prepared. We have this XAI toolkit that we've been pushing for that. But even further down the line, it'll be integration of natural language processing together with vision, together with, on and on. All of these different AI or as well as visualization, all of those things kind of working together to create these solutions. It's going to be harder and harder for a domain expert or an expert in one field to really create anything very meaningful. It's going to take pulling such disparate technologies together because of the complexity of systems that we'll be looking for. But that complexity within the systems is going to result in easier, more intuitive user interfaces and so forth. So it's a nice mix that we've got in our future.
It's pretty exciting. I mean, it's hard not to the amount of data we're able to acquire now. It's hard not to see that these things are going to have huge impact. So Jing, robotics. I mean, we're already seeing huge impact, but where do you think it's going? I mean, we're introducing new robotics, but let's just say a decade from now, what are we looking at for kind of the automation level in the operating rooms and interventional suites?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really the demand going to drive the innovation, and I see the world as it becomes increasingly aged, and that we do not have enough healthcare workers to meet the gap. So robotics will play a central role, in my opinion, in the next decade to automate some of the tedious and mandatory tasks to enable less health worker, less physician to treat more patients. To me, that's the biggest opportunity in front of us. And in the meantime, we have to keep drive the cost of robotic system down, which means we're gonna develop a more application specific robot rather than general purpose, multi-million dollar robotic platform. You're gonna see more like a small scale robot with AI come into the OR to help a surgeon do a very specific thing, but that does very well in this area.
It's a great point. We forget about human costs for medicine in general in terms of how many people we use to do different things and kind of how automation and robotics might really improve that and really. And I think also, your point on kind of automation and things that are can be kind of brought down to the manufacturing level to some degree in order to kind of improve speed, improve quality. Those are really great points. So I think that's pretty much all we have. We're getting to the end here, a little over 30 minutes, but we did pretty good. I'd like to thank all the folks out there, but especially like to thank Stephen and Jing for taking the time out. This is definitely done pro bono. They took the time to kind of help us out and kind of understand what Kitware does and what Medtronic does. We're seeing robotics, we're seeing AI, and kind of all the impact of these things. So I really, really do thank you both. Also, thank you for serving on our advisory board. That's great too. We really appreciate it. And lastly, I'm going to thank the audience for listening. And I'll put my big disclaimer out there. I'm no expert MC. I'm just an engineering researcher. So if I fumbled and I bumbled, like I always tell my kids, I'll do better next time. So take care, and I'll see you next time.